Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the Research Office for inviting me to give this training. I'm Zofia, and as Tatiana told you, I work as an health education manager at the Center of Excellence for Biobanking and Biomedical Research at the university. You heard about my research. And today, we're going to look at how researchers can navigate their ethical and legal responsibilities under Horizon Europe, focusing on topics such as ethics review process and GDPR compliance and informed consent. So the session will last about 1 hour, and I'll try to include 2-3 practical scenarios at the end to help illustrate how these principles apply in real projects. You'll also have time at the end to ask questions. I'm happy to receive questions from you to my email, and I will also share the slides. So this is a short time. In this short time together, we'll focus on the essentials, the key ideas and steps that every researcher should understand, while giving you a clear picture of how to approach more complex issues later on. The goal isn't to make you an expert in regulation, but to show how legal and ethical frameworks actually support good science. So let's start and explore how law and ethics come together to make research both compliant and meaningful. So before we examine how ethics are addressed within Horizon, and what they mean, how they are evaluated, and what researchers must do to ensure compliance and integrity throughout their projects, we will first consider very briefly from where researchers' responsibilities arise by explaining the background of ethical and legal frameworks. So research ethics didn't emerge overnight. It evolved through history and shaped by responses to harm and injustice. Each milestone we see here at this slide, from Nuremberg Code to Oviedo Convention and GDPR, now the AI Act, have strengthened and protected values such as dignity, integrity, and accountability in science. So today, these principles guide all research across Europe. So the major principles are, of course, autonomy, dignity, informed consent, and we always act with beneficence and justice, trustworthiness, and avoiding harm. So the Oviedo Convention reinforces these values as legal obligations, not just moral ones, as it is binding. So, human rights and research ethics are deeply connected by protecting individuals, their privacy, their health, and freedom of thought. So researchers must uphold these rights in every step of data collection, consent, and engagement. And this ethical practice is therefore both a legal and a human responsibility. The most important rights that are relevant to what we're going to talk today are, of course, the right to privacy and data protection, the right to life and health, the right to freedom of expression, and importantly, the right to benefit from scientific progress and to participate in cultural and intellectual life. So the most relevant human right in contemporary research science is, of course, the right to private and family life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This means our work with personal or health data must always balance public benefit with individual protection. So privacy is not a technical add-on, it is a fundamental right. And of course, for setting the background, one right we cannot continue without talking is the right to scientific progress. This is an important right that is a bit forgotten. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights introduces the right in 1948, and the right says that you have the right to benefit from scientific progress and to be recognized for one's contribution. This is a dual right and ensures both public access to knowledge and fair credit to researchers. So this right has now been applied in Article 15 of the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and it states and obliges the states to make science available, accessible, and of quality. It affirms that scientific freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. Nonetheless, researchers are stewards of this freedom and must use it ethically. So what is the right to scientific progress? The right to scientific progress says that everyone has the right to receive the benefits of a scientific advancement. And in the same time, researchers have the right to proper attribution and the recognition of their intellectual and innovative ideas. So the right to scientific progress is about access, quality, and inclusion. It reminds us that ethics isn't the barrier, it's what enables trust and participation. So responsible research ensures everyone benefits from this innovation. So we always have this challenge, how to balance the necessity of either utilizing health data or having human subjects in our research with safeguarding trust and the rights of human participants. And we have to do that even when there is uncertainty within laws, for example, in using sensitive data to advance health. So informed consent and data protection and transparency are not optional. They are the bridge between progress and protection. And of course, all research disciplines and research, no matter what the field, whether it is health, engineering, social science, or culture, the ethical foundation remains the same, remains constant, and we adapt these principles to context, but never compromise on dignity, justice, integrity, and so forth. This shared framework grounds the ethics review process we will discuss next for Horizon 2020. So, where ethics begin in Horizon Europe. Let's start with the legal foundation, which is, you can see that in Article 19 of the Horizon Europe regulation. It establishes that all funded actions must comply with ethical principles and with relevant EU national, international law, including EU and EU law, of course, including the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights and the European Convention on Human Rights. And from this first sentence alone, it's clear that ethics are not an afterthought. They are deeply intertwined with human rights. The regulation explicitly highlights principles such as proportionality, respect for privacy and data protection, the physical and mental integrity of persons, non-discrimination, and protection of environment and human health. These principles form the ethical foundation of every Horizon Europe project. So when you design a study proposal, you are expected to demonstrate how your research upholds these values. So now that we've seen where ethics are introduced in Horizon Europe regulation, let's move to the Model Grant Agreement, which is the second key legal reference the document that formally defines the relationship between your project, consortium, and the European Commission. Within the grant agreement, Article 14 specifically addresses ethics and research integrity. It reinforces the same principles as the regulation, but provides more operational detail about how they apply in practice. It states that all beneficiaries must carry out their activities in full compliance with ethical principles, including the highest standards of research integrity and in line with all applicable EU national and international laws, including the Charter of Fundamental Human Rights. Another important requirement is that all activities funded under Horizon Europe must have an exclusive focus on civil applications. This means that research should not have a military or non-civil purpose, even if it uses dual technologies like AI, cybersecurity tools, or drones. These are areas where ethical oversight is especially critical. And finally, Article 14 reminds beneficiaries that participation in Horizon Europe also implies a commitment to fundamental values of the European Union, which are, of course, respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and human rights, including the rights of minorities. So in other words, ethics in Horizon Europe go far beyond compliance. They express EU's broader vision of responsible human-centered research. Whether your work is in medicine, AI, social science, or engineering, these principles apply equally. Ethics is everywhere in research, and every project is expected to reflect these values in its design and implementation. So what cannot be funded very quickly? Horizon Europe will not fund any under circumstances, whatever is defined in Article 18 of the regulation, and that include human cloning for reproductive purposes, genetic modification of human beings that could become heritable, creation of human embryos solely for research or for stem cell procurement, somatic cell nuclear transfer techniques, or any activity that leads to the destruction of human embryos, research involving human stem cells, both adult and embryonic, may be funded only if it complies with national legislation and EU ethics standards. This means that a project involving such research can proceed only in the countries where it is legally permitted. So always check 3 levels of compliance: the national, EU, and international laws. But compliance with EU and international human rights law remains mandatory. So there are 9 ethics issues in Horizon Europe. The European Commission has identified these 9 main categories of ethics issues that may arise in research. The first is human embryonic stem cell and human embryos, followed by human participants, and then human cells and tissue. Next, we have personal data, which cover all research involving the collection, storage, or processing of personal or sensitive information. Then, of course, there's animals, non-EU countries, environment, health, and safety. And new in Horizon is, of course, artificial intelligence. AI was not treated as a separate ethics category in Horizon 2020 initially, but it has now been recognized as a distinct and complex area, especially because of the potential of bias, discrimination, and challenges to accountability and transparency. So finally, there is a 9th, more flexible category, and you can see that in the ethics annex. called other ethics issues. This is where you would flag anything that does not fit neatly into the predefined boxes. For example, social or behavioral research that could be misused or that raises new ethical questions due to emerging technologies. And then cutting across all these areas, there are two important underlying considerations that are always addressed. One is the risk of cross-cutting or overlapping issues where several ethics dimensions interact. And the other is the potential of misuse of results. In other words, even if your project is fully compliant and well-intentioned, it's important to think about how your results might be misapplied in a way that causes harm or violates rights. So these 9 categories form the backbone of ethics review process, and recognizing where your project fits among them is the first step towards a strong and credible proposal. So another cross-cutting concern is misuse, when research outcomes could be applied for harmful or unethical purposes. This includes knowledge material or technologies that might be repurposed for criminal or terrorist activities or contribute to chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapon development. So misuse can also be subtle forms. For instance, surveillance technologies that undermine civil liberties, or data-driven profiling tools that risk discrimination or stigmatization of vulnerable groups. So in Horizon Europe, these fall under ethics issues table, but may also overlap with security review if they pose potential safety threats. So researchers are expected to anticipate and mitigate these misuse risks through careful design and transparent governance and ethical reflection. I'm going to skip this one. So why ethics matter? And now that we've seen what ethics in Horizon Europe looks like in practice, let's take a moment to talk about why it actually matters. What's the motive behind all this? So ethics in research is something viewed as an administrative task, something you complete at the end of a proposal just before submission, but in reality, ethics and integrity are not a box-ticking exercise. They are core components of excellent research and innovation. The European Commission sees ethics as a foundation of trust in science, innovation, and the people behind it. And this is why the Commission promotes that we call ethics by design, means thinking about ethical aspects from the very beginning and integrating them into your research planning and design, and not adding them later as an afterthought. So what is the practical process? The ethics issue table and self-assessment. So now we understand the ethical and legal foundations of Horizon Europe, which is the why. Let's turn to the practical process, how ethics are identified, evaluated, and monitored within a proposal. The first and most important step is completing the ethics self-assessment, which is found in Part A, Section 4, the administrative forms in the EU funding and tenders portal. This process has 2 simple steps, but both are quite crucial. The first step, you answer a series of questions in the ethics issue table. These questions help identify whether your research involves any activity with ethical implications, such as human participation, And the second step is whether you have, if you have answered yes to any question, you must provide additional information explaining how you will address that issue and how your approach ensures compliance with all relevant laws and ethical standards. For instance, if your project involves human participants, you must describe your informed consent procedures, your ethics approval process, and your data protection strategy. If your project includes AI systems, you must explain how you prevent bias, ensure explainability, and maintain human oversight. This part, your written explanation, forms the ethics self-assessment itself. It becomes part of the proposal and will be examined by ethics experts during the evaluation. So here you can see an example of how the ethics issue table looks in practice. This one focuses on the sections about the environment, health and safety, which is one of the main ethics categories. For example, you may be asked whether your research uses substances or technologies that could harm humans, animals, or the environment, or if it involves endangered species or protected areas. If you answer yes to any of these questions, you need to include a bit more detail in your proposal, things like a risk-benefit analysis and how you apply the precautionary principle and what safety measures you plan to implement. You should also have supporting documents ready, such as the laboratory safety classification or any necessary authorizations or permits. The key idea is that these materials shouldn't be prepared at the last minute. So some concrete examples of what the table includes. Regarding artificial intelligence, there might be questions, and does the activity involve AI-based systems? Could AI potentially stigmatize or discriminate against people? Does it replace or influence human decisions? Similarly, for personal data, you will be asked whether your research involves processing new or existing personal data or transferring data outside of you. So if you answer yes to these questions, they're going to be required a detailed explanation how you're going to minimize any risks. So let's move to the ethics screening. So after the ethics self-assessment that you have completed, at proposal stage, the next step is the ethics screening, which is carried out by the European Commission. This screening only applies to shortlisted proposals, of course. Those on the main list or the reserve list. It's conducted by at least 2 independent ethics experts, and it's completely separate from the scientific evaluation. So while the scientific review looks excellent and impact, this screening focuses only on ethics. So the screening takes place before the grant agreement is signed. If the reviewers identify serious or complex ethics issues, the proposal moves to full ethics assessment, which is deeper and more detailed process. So in such case, the signature of the grant agreement may be slightly delayed until all ethics requirements are clearly defined. For proposals that don't raise major ethics concerns, the process is much simpler and they are cleared with no additional ethics requirements. So as mentioned, when a project is found to raise serious or complex ethics issues, it must go through a full ethics assessment but when does a proposal qualify as serious? It's considered serious when the research has the potential to violate fundamental rights or freedoms as protected by the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights or the European Convention of Human Rights. It's also serious if the project could undermine key EU values, the values that we already talked about: human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, and the rule of law. Another case is when the research could cause significant harm to participants, researchers, the public, or to animals, or the environment. And finally, if there are concerns about integrity of the data or research practices, meaning doubts about honesty, reliability, or transparency, the proposal will also be flagged as serious. In such cases, the Commission may request full ethics assessment before the project can proceed. So some proposals are considered complex from an ethics perspective. This happens when research uses very advanced or untested methods or technologies that might create uncertainty about participant safety or the impact on fundamental rights or research integrity. A proposal can also be complex if it raises significant ethics issues at scale. For example, when it involves large number of participants, controversial methods, or high-risk technologies, or when the work is carried out is sensitive or high-risk, is in sensitive or high-risk regions. So finally, projects can be complex when they raise multiple or overlapping ethics issues. For instance, research with marginalized or vulnerable groups, where risk like stigmatization or exclusion could combine and increase their ethical impact. So in short, complexity arises when a project scope, design, or context makes its ethical risk more significant or harder to manage, and that's when a full ethics assessment is usually required. So there is also a third situation where a proposal can be considered both serious and complex from an ethics point of view. This happens when the research area itself is the subject of major ethical debate. For example, when methods or technologies involved are still being widely discussed among scientists and ethicists. It also applies when there are serious doubts about researchers or institutions' ability to properly manage or mitigate the risk linked to the project. Another case is when the research poses a high risk of misuse and no clear or effective measures exist to contain that risk. Finally, if the proposal shows a lack of awareness of key ethical issues, it will automatically be flagged as serious or complex. So the most important point is the last point, where if ethics are not properly addressed from the start, the project will undergo full ethics assessment and later face closer monitoring by the Commission. So very briefly, to see what are the possible outcomes of ethics screening. So if during the assessment you answer no to all questions, meaning your project raises no ethical concerns, you receive a straightforward ethics clearance. If you do answer yes to some questions, the Commission and ethics expert will check whether these issues are serious or complex. If not, and your approach complies with national, European, and international legislation, you again receive ethics clearance and no further requirements are asked. However, if the project is ethically sound but still needs extra oversight, the Commission may ask you to appoint an independent ethics advisor or ethics board. In that case, you will receive a conditional ethics clearance. So finally, if your proposal does raise serious or complex ethics issues, it will go through a full ethics assessment. So, as you can see, the more robust you address ethics early on, the sooner this process will be completed. So, once a project goes through full ethics assessment, there are several possible outcomes. If it receives ethics clearance, the grant agreement can be finalized without delay. If the proposal receives conditional ethics clearance, it means that certain ethics requirements must still be met. So these requirements might be detailed in the ethics summary report and must be fulfilled before the grant agreement is signed, or included as contractual obligations in the grant agreement. So often these will involve creating a dedicated ethics work package with specific ethics deliverables. For example, providing consent procedures, copies of ethics approvals, and other documentation as part of reporting and monitoring. So this process doesn't stop once you get funded. Ethics continues during the whole lifetime of the project. An ethics review can be launched if your project raises complex or sensitive issues. In that case, the Commission will check whether you're actually doing what you promised in terms of consent, data protection, safety, animals welfare, AI risk, and so on. So this review is not optional. It's initiated by the project officer if something is unclear or if documents you've provided are not convincing. It's then handled by up to 5 independent ethics experts. So the message is ethics is not a box to tick. At proposal stage, for high-risk project, compliance is monitored all the way through the implementation. So this slide gives a clear overview of how the ethics process unfolds in Horizon Europe. It's a snapshot. It starts with the ethics self-assessment, as we said, completed by the applicant during the application phase. If your proposal passes the scientific evaluation and is placed on the main or reserve list, it undergoes ethics screening by the Commission ethics experts to evaluate the level and seriousness of potential issues. Projects flagged as raising serious or complex ethics issues are then subject to full ethics assessment, where additional details may be requested on the ethics work package or advisory board may be needed to be added. Finally, for projects with ongoing ethical sensitivities, the Commission may conduct ethics review checks or audits during the implementation of the project. So, to properly address ethics in your proposal and project, the first step is a thorough ethics self-assessment, and ideally discuss with the consortium early the project design and not left it to the last minute. I'm going to go a bit more faster because don't have much time. So some takeaways is the key message is to consider ethics early from the very beginning of your project ideation, not just right before submission. Ethics should be embedded in your research design from the start. Always refer to relevant national, EU, and international laws and standards. as what is permissible in one country may not be in another country, and make sure you're aware of these differences when planning your activities. So you can find more information about all this in the grant agreement, in Horizon Program Guide, and so forth. You will receive these slides, and I'll add the links. So there's also guidance on the use. So now turning to how to minimize the ethics complexity of the project. There is a need for cross-project compliance strategies and good practices. So in general, documentation and compliance, clear documentation is the backbone of ethical compliance. So every project must maintain a privacy policy and data protection impact assessment to show accountability and transparency. Also, before any data or participant involvement, ethics review, IRBs or national bioethics bodies must be obtained. And of course, if it's needed, there must be oversight bodies during the lifetime of the project, and training of health issues and GDPR issues of the researchers and people that are involved in research. So very briefly, when working with patients, children, or anyone in vulnerable positions, you need to keep consent clear, layered, and ongoing. Make withdrawal simple and transparent, and always plan how to handle incidental findings. One of the most often finding of the ethics review is that they don't have a clear policy about incidental findings. For minors or cognitive impaired participants, involve guardians and use age-appropriate material, of course. If procedures are invasive, you need to justify the need and strengthen safety monitoring. So when human samples and biobanks are involved, you need to double check that existing consent really allows for new uses of international sharing. If not, you need to consent or request an ethics waiver. So maintain a sample provenance record showing consent scope and approvals. And for imported human tissue, make sure all EU permits are in order. So also treat data like living organisms. So you need to protect it, track it, and know where it travels. You need to run a data protection impact assessment when you're dealing with, especially with sensitive data or special data, how they're called under the GDPR. If you can, you should apply pseudonymization techniques and encryption by default, and audit who has access. If partners are outside the EU, you need to use GDPR safeguards and sign the standard contractual clauses and so forth. So regarding artificial intelligence, you need to keep it explainable. Decisions must always have a human in the loop. Test for bias, update models regularly, and document their purpose, inputs and limits in a clear fact sheet. So, of course, for animals, the use of animals should be done only when no alternative research type exists. Design studies with the three ours in mind, replace, reduce, refine, and publish all results, even neutral ones, to avoid repetition. And document every lab risk, safety protocol, and the GLP compliance step. This shows reviewers that the project considers human and environmental safety as integral to ethics. So, as we said, for non-EU collaboration, you need to track all cross-border flows of samples or data. If you collaborate outside EU, apply proper safeguards and update consent language. It needs to be included in the consent that transfer to non-EU countries will happen. Of course, for governance and oversight, set an independent ethics board early if it's needed. Include their legal, GDPR, AI, and patient experts. They need to meet regularly and document actions and keep ethics visible through a dedicated work package with clear deliverables. And for clinical or high-risk work, you need to add a data safety board and use risk plan. So regarding users and security, you need to think ahead about your use risks and profiling tools, AI misuses, sensitive data, and so forth. And create a short mitigation plan as to who controls access, how publications are reviewed, and how issues are escalated. So finally, you need to involve patients and public, integrate gender analysis where relevant, and commit to open science within GDPR limits. And RRI isn't bureaucracy, it's how we make research meaningful. So in some instances, you might need to have access committees. For example, in biobanks, it was compulsory to create an access committee where when researchers ask for samples or data, you have to review their proposal and ask for certain certain documents, for example, RECs or bioethics approval. And what else? So I'm going to move, because we don't have much time. And we always signed MTAs and DPAs between EU countries when data are transferred. So now we don't really have much time to talk about the GDPR and informed consent. I'm going to go very quickly, as we all know that GDPR is the main legal instrument that regulates research about when it involves data, either processing, storage, or sharing personal data. It applies to all EU residents worldwide. There are certain key principles affecting research that are established in this legal instrument. It's data minimization, accountability and transparency, security and confidentiality. It also states all the types of data, and depending on what data you use, specific measures need to be followed, especially if you use sensitive data or special data as they're stated in the regulation. Some examples of what special categories of data are: it's racial or ethnic origin, sexual orientation, of course, health data, genetic data, and so forth. It also includes the data subject rights that you have to include in the informed consent forms. The the most important right of the data subject is, of course, the right to withdraw. And so the most important thing is that consent forms should specify when and how can someone withdraw from research. And it should be as easy as it was to be part of the research. So there are different types of consent, and each researcher has to take in consideration the specifics of the project and which consent is better suited for their project. I'm not going to go through all these types, but you can have a look at them later. So I'm going to very, very quickly say that a valid consent consists of these 5 facts, which is you have to make sure that the participant has capacity. So by default, we say that the participant has capacity, but if it comes to the attention of the researcher that the participant is not understanding the purpose of the research or why is participating, it has to go through specific steps to make sure that it has capacity. Of course, there must be voluntariness, and this sometimes it is very difficult to understand whether it was voluntary when relationships between participants and doctors exist, as doctors are also the researcher. Of course, there needs to be a provision of sufficient information, and this also depends on the research project. And sufficient information means that the participant will be able to make a clear decision whether he wants to participate to the project. And of course, all the information should be delivered in lay language in order for the participant to understand and comprehend, and this should be documented to a consent form and signed. So you always give sufficient time to the participant to reflect and understand the project before signing the consent form. And also, very importantly, you have to give time for questions. So I'm gonna skip all this and gonna try. I don't know how much time do we have. Can we see some scenarios? How many? Oh, we have to. Okay, that's good. So summary of the key points. So ethical and legal frameworks are dynamic. Informed consent should be understood as a process. The most suitable model of consent should be adopted and must be as easy to withdraw consent as it is to consent. And data protection is critical to ensuring trust and acceptability. So governance and oversight ensure accountability. So I have some scenarios that we can have a look as it was requested. So the first one, it's about a consortium that validates a CFS blood-free biomarker panel to flag early cerebrovascular amyloid risk in adults of 55 plus year. It uses historical biobank samples that are used, and an explainable AI model combines proteomics and MRI. And one of the data analysis partners outside the EU. So what ethical questions might be raised from this? The first one, of course, is does the original consent cover the secondary use? Does it cover international sharing? And does it cover a potential contact of the participants? So this is something that would be evaluated based on the consent forms. Of course, how do we respect the right not to know while managing clinically relevant essential findings? What triggers a DPIA, and what are your must-haves in it? Is data transfer to a non-EU partner lawful and appropriately safeguarded? What human in the loop is necessary for AI-assisted risk reports? So, in these cases, you should use layered plain language consent, add ongoing consent checkpoints, and offer opt-out from individuals. Adopt a written incidental finding policy. This is very important if you are planning to give results. Complete the DPIA data impact assessment before large-scale processing. For non-EU transfers, you need to implement GDPR Act 46 safeguards, which is to sign the standard contractual clauses. The standard contractual clauses is a contract, an agreement, which is the same as the MTAs we signed between the EU countries, but the clauses there are standard so that the member that is outside the EU guarantees that it will follow all the rules under the GDPR. So I'll move to the next one. There are more that you could do here. So this is a non-randomized phase 2 trial in children with relapse, and all test a genomics guide regime. There is a smart phone app that collects pulse and activity data between visits, and samples move between EU sites, and results inform dose adjustments. And here we need to ask how do we structure assent consent so minors understand and guardians truly consent. So depending on the age, there are ethics guidelines how to create an assent process, and it's different for very small children and under 12, and it's different for 12-year-olds, and it's different for 16, 17-year-olds, and it must happen in parallel with the consent that is given by the guardians. The other thing is, because they are minors, the question is, what safety oversight is proportionate in this instance? Does the app create systematic monitoring, profiling risk under the GDPR? How do we handle withdrawal, especially if data already uploaded or analyzed? Which equity checks ensures models don't disadvantage subgroups? So we said the first thing is that we need a double consent model, which is age-appropriate assent plus the guardian consent. Also for the app, there should be a DPIA before deployment, and local encryption and clear harass notices and so forth. And of course, define the withdrawal pathways, what happens to pseudonymized or irreversibly anonymized data if they have already been used in research. And of course, plant bias check, sex, age, and restrict AI to decision support with clinician oversight. So this is another scenario. To the next one. So this is a transnational consortium studies liver disease by implanting a human's iPSC-derived liver organoids to immunodeficient mice. The goal is to understand fibrosis and test antifibrotic compounds before human trials. No human participants are recruited, but human-derived cells are used. So questions arise about ethical status of human-animal chimeras, proportionality of animal suffering, and governance of human cells, provenance, and consent for secondary use. So what are the ethical and legal limits of creating human-animal chimeras for biomedical purposes? It's the first question. Do the original donors consent for this HIPSC line adequately cover animal implantation and commercial research? So this must be clearly stated in the consent form. How can we ensure compliance with the 3 Rs for the protection of animals and be transparent about the welfare of animals and monitor? Should organs experiments be pre-registered, and who provides ethical oversight when human cells are involved? So the first thing is to confirm that iPSC lines come from donors with valid consent, allowing secondary use, including xenoplantation, genetic modification, and commercial development. Seek approval from both animal ethics committees and institutional review boards, given the human-animal interface, comply with the 3 Rs regarding the animals' safety, and use in vivo organoid models before in vitro, before in vivo. So you might need to pre-register the studies for transparency reasons, and of course document the origin and concern terms and so forth. This we will not see. So I have a lot of scenarios. So this is actually a low-risk ethics research. A university uses existing anonymized plasma samples and associated clinical data from certified national biobank to validate a protein biomarker for cardiovascular disease. All samples were originally collected under REC approval studies, consented for secondary use, and are now irreversibly anonymized. Before transfer, no new data collections, no invention, no cross-border transfer. Is this considered a low ethics research? What minimal documentation should still be provided to the funder or REC? What can data be regarded as fully anonymized? Do the researchers still need ethics committee notification or just a waiver? So the first thing is to consider whether the data are truly anonymized. If there is no key or code that can identify the participants, then they are truly anonymized. And of course, there is need, again, even if it's low risk, to keep documentation, also keep the biobank's approval letter, sample access agreement, and data use license. So this is much more simple than other cases. Another scenario about engineering and AI-assisted drone inspection for bridge safety. This is a project where the engineering consulting develops autonomous drones to inspect aging bridges using high-resolution cameras and AI image analysis to detect cracks. Some flights occur over public roads and near residential areas. So the questions are, what privacy or data protection issues arise when drones capture essential images of people or vehicles? Is specific airspace authorization needed? How can the project minimize surveillance concerns? So some minimization measures could be the use of geofencing and image blurring to prevent capture of identifiable individuals, contact data protection impact assessment before field work, and obtain, of course, aviation authority clearance, and inform the public with visible sign and at the project website as well. So how a lot of scenarios. Another scenario that involves a different discipline. Regarding linguistics, researchers that record spoken stories in an endangered dialect among elderly speakers in rural regions. So the data will be stored in an open access corpus. So the key questions are, what considered valid informed consent for voice recording? Now we have different ways of collecting data from voices, from smells, and so forth, and this creates issues as to what valid informed consent is for this instance for voice recording, and how can participants retain control over their personal narratives. When does open access conflict with privacy or cultural ownership? So there needs to be used a plain language consent explaining the purpose and the access level and withdrawal rights of the participants prior choices, for example, to be used only for public users, for research only, or anonymously by experts. And of course, apply GDPR rules for identifiable voice data and pseudonymized metadata. Provide participants with access to the final archive for verification or withdrawal, and ensure cultural sensitivity when publishing folklore or traditional stories. So one more, I think, let's see. Oh, I think that's it. I'm not going to go through the next one. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much. That was very useful.